We want to update you on the polygamist cult leader trial and a very interesting moment that just happened a couple minutes ago. This case is happening in Georgia.
Have you ever seen a man get arrested mid-live stream, shirtless, surrounded by half-naked women, screaming that he's basically God while cops knock at the door? No? Then allow me to introduce you to the circus that is the Nature Boy trial. A case so bizarre, so painfully unserious, yet terrifyingly real, it seems almost made up. Stick around to the end to hear how ridiculous this trial can really get and the insane ending to the saga that is Nature Boy. Let's start with the basics, because this trial was years in the making. Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, aka Three God, aka a walking red flag with Wi-Fi, once claimed to be a divine being, not figuratively, literally. This man told his followers he was God with a capital G. Meanwhile, he was also busy uploading revenge explicit videos, encouraging cult-style beatdowns, and forbidding women from wearing shirts for spiritual reasons, obviously. But back to the arrest. In April 2022, police pulled up to his Georgia compound where Bishop found himself face to face with the law. His followers were still orbiting around him, but they accepted his fate once they slapped the cuffs on him. The man who called himself Three God was about to get acquainted with the one true higher power, the American justice system. The charges? Forcing himself on women, false imprisonment, and the unauthorized posting of explicit content. But really, that barely scratches the surface. See, Bishop wasn't just an Instagram guru gone rogue. He was the leader of Carbon Nation. What started as a community of enlightenment spiraled into something far darker, a space where control, manipulation, humiliation, and exploitation was masked as divine awakening. The prosecutors alleged that when one young woman tried to leave the group in 2022, Bishop responded not with a blessing, but with violence. According to testimony, he forced himself on her. Afterward, he posted explicit footage of her online, videos she never consented to share. Now, this is the part where you might be asking, how did he get so many people to follow him? Well, the answer lies in charisma and calculated targeting. Bishop didn't go after Wall Street execs or philosophy majors. He went after the vulnerable, people searching for meaning, for purpose, for a place to belong. Many of his followers were black men and women disillusioned with Western systems, looking for healing, identity, culture. Bishop offered that until they were in too deep to leave. Court testimony from former members gave a full picture. One woman said she was lured by the spiritual message, only to find herself isolated and forced into intimate acts under the guise of divine duty. When she finally escaped, Bishop released footage of her engaging in those intimate acts. Another woman who joined in 2017 described a similar path. What started as love bombing and peace spiraled into group violence. Bishop allegedly encouraged beatdowns between members, separating the men from the women, declaring every woman his wife, and filming everything for his followers online. In court, prosecutors introduced videos Bishop himself recorded, one where he declared women should be punished for disrespecting their God, him. Another where he laughed as women jumped a fellow member. His own words became the damning evidence. And then there were the philosophical rants. Yikes, the rants. Nature Boy once uploaded a video where he tried to break down the metaphysical meaning of the number 1, claiming it doesn't actually exist because everything is nothing and we are all just dreaming the illusion of numbers. Say what now? Oh, another gem. He admitted on camera that he had performed intimate acts on men for money in his past and openly stated that he would have gone bisexual for a career in Hollywood because that's how the industry works. Sir, what does that have to do with spiritual healing? This man went from talking about the sacred geometry of the universe to bragging about why he was shirtless on Instagram Live every morning. According to one former member, women were required to jump in the sack with him by day 3, or they'd be accused of harboring demonic resistance. Even more disturbing, there were children around. In one infamous video, Bishop described letting a child touch his genitals and called it pure. He said it was part of nature. That moment, more than any other, turned public curiosity into public outrage. Many who had followed the story casually before now recognized the deep sickness at the center of this so-called community. And yet, like any cult leader clearly off their rocker, he had defenders. Even in court, some former followers hesitated, not because they believed in him still, but because his manipulation ran deep. He called himself God. He told them that there were downloads of him. He said women were goddesses in training. And what about Bishop? When detectives questioned him, he denied everything, claimed he was a ladies' man, and that he didn't need SA women because they all wanted him. He was clearly high off his own supply of delusion. As this first section of the trial wrapped up, the vibe shifted from spectacle to serious. What began as a sideshow with memes and live streams became something much heavier, a reckoning. This wasn't about being shirtless in the woods anymore. It was about what happens when a man uses spirituality to abuse power, and how long the justice system takes to catch up. So, where were we? Right. Nature Boy, aka Eligio Bishop, had just been dragged off his self-declared throne, shirtless, greasy, and still trying to live stream his arrest like it was a divine event. The first week of court had cracked open the lid on Carbon Nation and exposed it for what it truly was. But in section 2 of the trial, that's when the real drama started. Because guess who started flipping? The very people who once called him God. It was almost poetic. Witness after witness, most of them former Carbon Nation members, now taking the stand with a different gospel. Let's start with Velvet Marquez.
They're calling, but I'm not answering.
Velvet was once Nature Boy's queen, his top-ranking wife, the main woman he paraded around as divine feminine energy incarnate. They had a child together. She was loyal. She defended him when the media came knocking. But in court, Velvet's tune had changed completely. She testified to being groomed, isolated from her family, mentally broken down, and emotionally tormented. She said Bishop convinced her she had no identity outside of serving him. He told us he was our higher self, she said, and that disobeying him was disobeying God. Velvet wasn't alone. Another former member, nicknamed Solar, took the stand next. He had once been Bishop's right-hand man. Solar admitted to helping enforce Bishop's rules, including encouraging group beatdowns and gaslighting women who tried to leave. He looked visibly shaken on the stand, saying he now realized how deep the psychological manipulation ran. Then came the videos again. Yes, Section 2 of the trial included more footage from Bishop's personal archive. Just from the videos, Bishop became his own lawyer's number op because he was being seen crashing out on camera for everyone to see. One clip showed Bishop screaming at one of his wives for daring to question him. "You are nothing without me," he shouted, pacing in a room full of silent, blank-faced followers. Another clip had him bragging that women were created to serve the divine phallus. His words, not mine. The prosecutor paused the video. "Is this what you meant by spiritual guidance?" she asked. Silence. But the wildest moment in this stretch of the trial wasn't video. It wasn't even testimony. It was what happened during the lunch break. As reporters gathered outside the courthouse, one of Bishop's loyalists started live streaming from her phone on the courthouse steps. Dressed in a goddess robe and speaking in tongues, she declared that Bishop's incarnation would rise again, and that the third dimension court system had no power over divinity. Security escorted her off the property, but not before she yelled, "You're judging God in the flesh." But perhaps the most damning piece of Section 2 came from a medical expert. The prosecution brought in a psychologist who had interviewed several former Carbon Nation members. Her diagnosis? Mass coercive control, akin to religious cult brainwashing. She compared Bishop's tactics to those of infamous leaders like Jim Jones and David Koresh. Isolation, thought reform, reinforcement of dependency, physical access disguised as spiritual duty. Then came the blow. She said Bishop met every clinical marker for narcissistic personality disorder with malignant traits. He smirked from the defense table like it was a compliment. Now, let's talk about his defense. Because if you thought this courtroom strategy might involve humility, apology, or any type of sanity, you clearly haven't met Eligio Bishop. Nature Boy's legal team argued that all interactions in Carbon Nation were consensual, that the women who joined did so willingly, that the videos were performance art, that Bishop was being prosecuted not for crimes, but for being an eccentric black man with a following. Oh, they tried to spin it as cultural suppression, saying Bishop's message was misunderstood, that he was simply reviving African spiritual systems and being punished for not conforming to Western religious norms. They pointed out that while Bishop preached African traditions, he did so while live streaming from an iPhone wearing designer shades and demanding his followers hand over their cash. As Section 2 wrapped up, the tone changed entirely. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was about how one man manipulated trauma, weaponized hope, and turned spirituality into submission. And as the judge called for recess, you could feel the shift. No more laughing, no more memes. This case was starting to cut deep because it asked a bigger question. What does justice look like when the abuser calls himself God? By the time the trial entered its final weeks, the court had heard enough to know one thing. This man wasn't a misunderstood guru. He wasn't a revolutionary. He was a walking manipulation machine. But Bishop wasn't about to go down quietly. First, the defense made one last Hail Mary: character witnesses. Now, you might think they'd bring in spiritual leaders, maybe someone who could vouch for Bishop's intentions. Nope. They brought in 2 remaining loyalists from Carbon Nation, both of whom had memorized their testimonies like actors with all the talent of a YouTube drama series. "I've never been more free than under 3 God," said one woman, eyes locked on the jury, voice quivering with devotion. "Everything I did, I chose to do," said the second. "He opened my eyes to the truth." The jury looked unconvinced. One juror was visibly rolling her eyes. The judge, deadpan. But Bishop? He was glowing, smiling, like a man who still believed this was all part of his divine documentary. Then came the moment nobody saw coming. Bishop took the stand. Yes, against all legal advice, Nature Boy walked up to that witness box and decided to testify. It was a performance. He opened with, "I want to first thank this court for allowing the Messiah to speak." Already off to a great start. Then he launched into a meandering speech about his divine mission, claiming that he had been sent by the universe to awaken melanated people to their true selves. He said that the system had always feared strong black men with vision, and that this entire trial was a spiritual assassination. He even quoted Bible verses, twisted of course, to justify his control over women. "The woman was made for a man," he said, "and I am man, multiplied by God." The prosecutor leaned in. "So, you're saying the women who say you beat them and isolated them were actually being healed?" "Absolutely," Bishop replied, without blinking. And that was the moment the court collectively realized this man wasn't defending himself. Even now, on the verge of conviction, he couldn't stop preaching his own divinity. The prosecution rested, and then the closing arguments began. The defense painted Bishop as an outsider, a man whose alternative lifestyle was being criminalized. They leaned hard into cultural relativism, saying the jury shouldn't judge what they didn't understand. But the prosecution? No, they brought it home. They reminded the jury of every testimony, every video. This is not about spiritual beliefs, the prosecutor said. This is about a man who used those beliefs to create a prison. And when anyone tried to escape, he turned that prison into a battlefield. The jury deliberated for hours. There was tension, but not confusion. The evidence was damning. The videos were Bishop's own. The testimonies were unshakable, and the man who claimed to be God had done more confessing than denying. And then it was over. Guilty on multiple counts: essay, coercion, revenge videos, false imprisonment. The sentencing phase began. And suddenly the confidence cracked. Bishop looked smaller. No robe, no live stream, no throne of followers, just a man in a county jumpsuit, listening to the consequences of his delusions. But wait, it gets more surreal. At sentencing, Bishop requested to make one last statement. Permission granted. He stood, adjusting his orange jumpsuit like it was a royal robe, and said, "I forgive all of you. You don't know what you've done, but one day you will see the light I tried to give." Even the bailiff looked tired. He was sentenced to decades with additional charges still pending in other states. And Carbon Nation? Gone, dismantled, the Instagram pages deleted, the YouTube videos scrubbed, the compound empty. Some of the followers have returned to their families. Others are still processing the psychological mess they were dragged through. But the cult, as it was, no longer exists. But here's the thing. This case wasn't just about one man. It was about power, about how spiritual language can be weaponized, about how trauma can be exploited under the name of healing, about how charisma, unchecked, becomes controlled. Bishop didn't invent manipulation, but he wrapped it in enough astrology, chakra chants, and pseudo-African spirituality to make it feel divine. And that's why people followed him. Not because he was brilliant, but because he spoke to the broken parts of them, and then broke them further. So what do we learn from all of this? We learned that not every healer is holy. That sometimes the most dangerous leaders don't wear uniforms, they wear shiny crystals and whisper affirmations. And we learn that when someone tells you they're God, run, don't walk. Because you're about 3 days away from giving up your phone, your name, your dignity, and probably your last jar of coconut oil. In the end, Eligio Bishop didn't just fall, he imploded. The illusion collapsed. The curtain dropped. 3 God became inmate 95847, and the world moved on. The saga of Nature Boy is over. The cult is dead, but the comedy of this ridiculous case, that's divine. If you found this video entertaining, hit the like and subscribe button for more deep dives into the world of rich Black history. Drop a comment below and let us know which story surprised or resonated with you the most.